Many wide receivers will be drafted in the second and third round in the upcoming NFL draft, but only some of them will be fantasy relevant in their rookie season. We dig into the remaining top wide receiver prospects on today's episode of Locked On Fantasy Football.
You are Locked On Fantasy, your daily NFL fantasy podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. I'm one of your co-hosts, Michelle Magdziuk, and when I'm not doing this, I'm a researcher and fantasy analyst at NFL Network.
And I'm your other co-host, Vinnie Iyer. When I'm not doing this, I'm writing about NFL fantasy and betting for sportingnews.com, including a lot to get you ready for the 2024 NFL Draft, which happens Thursday, 3 days from now. Can't wait.
Woo woo. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150 win or lose. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. All right, over our last two episodes on Thursday and Friday, we have now discussed 9 wide receiver prospects. So we went through the top 3 on Thursday, Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Nabers, and Rome Odunze. And then on Friday, we came back with 6 more prospects, Brian Thomas Jr., Troy Franklin, A.D. Mitchell, Xavier Worthy, Ladd McConkey, and Keon Coleman. So if you missed those episodes, go listen to those after today's show. We're going to hit on 6 more wide receiver prospects to kind of close out the wide receiver prospects heading into the NFL draft. These guys likely to go in the second round, maybe third round, maybe surprise us and get into the bottom of the first round here. Let's start with one guy that a lot of people like. I am not as high on, but I want to hear your thoughts. Ricky Purcell out of Florida. This dude never really produced all that much. Wasn't a touchdown guy at all. 4 touchdowns. He did average quite a high average depth of target. I'm not overly impressed with anything that he's done in college. He's going to be 24 years old to start the season. He did have that one insane catch. I get it. It's super cool, but none of his advanced stats are impressive, and his tape isn't impressive to me. Tell me why I'm too low on Ricky, or do you agree with me?
Yeah, he's a hard guy for me to look at. I mean, I couldn't place him exactly, so I kind of put him right in the middle in between 10 and 20, right there at 13. Like, I think there's a lot of little things he does well, and I think if he goes to the right team, he can develop those attributes a little bit more and continue to build on those. So I do look at him and say, hey, I want to be more into him, but I'm not quite. And I want to say that I did like him a little bit more than you had some other people going ahead. I do have him right now going to the Lions. They're at 61, so in the draft. So he has a bit of route running upside there, and I think he would be more that number 2. He would not be the guy that is the Jameson Williams replacement if it's a deep threat. And I think you got to be comfortable with his role. And I think his role is going to be better and more effective in reality than in fantasy. I'm going to bring it that way and say he's intriguing if he goes to space where he's going to see some targets. And really the Lions, if they go on that route, say they're still going to take their shot on Jameson Williams and see what he can do as a deep threat. Keep in mind, Amon-Ra St. Brown is in the slot, so they have room for 2 outside guys if they want to stick with Williams there. So that would open up some opportunities if he ends up with the Lions. I think he's a good fit there. So I think that's about it for him. Like, I think late second round is probably his ceiling for me.
I know. I actually really don't care where he lands. That's the sad part is like,
don't do
I guess
that.
maybe if he's the Bills wide receiver 1, I'll start to think about him. I just, like you said, I think he'll be a better NFL wide receiver. I'm not saying he can't be good for a team. I just don't think he's going to provide really any fantasy goodness, at least in his rookie season. Maybe I'm dead wrong, but I don't really like him at all. One guy, though, I'm super high on is Roman Wilson out of Michigan. He is on the smaller side, 5'10 and a half, 185 pounds. Does have a smaller wingspan at 72 and a half inches. Now, still 2 inches taller than what we were talking about with Ladd McConkey, right? When I was worried about that on Friday. But he can do pretty much everything. He's super, super reliable, a smooth route runner, reliable hands. Only had 5 total drops over the 3 seasons in college. He's a good athlete. He ran a 4.39 40-yard dash. He's explosive. he's not going to like have the flashiest plays on tape, but he's just, like I said, consistent. He caught 12 of JJ McCarthy's 22 passing touchdowns last year. We have to remember, like, when you look at his stats, it's not going to look insane with his receiving yards, but the Michigan only had 2,991 passing yards last year, 332 pass attempts. So he did as much as he could do in this Michigan offense. And again, caught more than 50% of JJ McCarthy's touchdowns. It's easy to say. I think his best landing spot would be the Chargers, right? With Jim Harbaugh. But how are you feeling about Roman Wilson? Do you think I'm too high on him? Because I think he could be a guy that could handle upwards of 90 receptions in his rookie season.
I think because of his size, he may drop into the third round, but I still see him being effective. And again, this is not a knock on these receivers. When Puka Nacua lasts really long, there is so much receiving depth. And again, teams are got a lot of needs, and they're specifically looking at other things, and they're going to take advantage of that depth. So sometimes these receivers are going to fall because of that. And you look at Roman Wilson, I think he would be a good so-called follow-up receiver. You look at the Chargers, they're without Keenan Allen. So if they go after one of those top receivers on the outside, they need a backup guy to work the slot and fill the Keenan Allen role. Same thing with the Cardinals. Michael Wilson, I don't think is a dedicated slot. They moved on from Rondell Moore. That's where I actually have Roman Wilson going. Like, that would be kind of an interesting combo, right? Michigan, Ohio State playing with each other, Harrison and Wilson, and taking advantage of Kyler Murray. And we know little Rondell Moore didn't work out all that much, and they moved on from him and traded him to Atlanta. So I think he's a much better version than Rondell Moore, like in that kind of role. Like,
And
Moore
he's
was
almost
just,
3 inches taller
yeah,
than
he
Rondell Moore.
just didn't have a role. Like, they just kind of were, is he a running back? Is he a wide receiver? Wilson is a wide receiver. You can also help your team in the return game if you wanted that as well. So, yeah, he's just a dynamic playmaker. Get the ball in his hands, and we'll see what happens. So I think anything is possible here with Roman Wilson. I think he would definitely excite me a lot more than Ricky there going from the Gators to the NFL, where I look at Roman, I just see him on the field and he stands up and he's making plays all the time. And I think he'll find a way to do that. He's just too good coming out of a pretty good offense. We'll see. Maybe he ends up wherever JJ McCarthy lands, right? That's also a possibility. Say the Vikings want to add a little bit of wide receiver help. They see Jordan Addison on the outside. They did move on from KJ Osborne. Maybe say, okay, we're going to have Jefferson Addison on the outside. We're going to put Wilson in the slot and operate that way with Kevin O'Connell. And I could also maybe see the Rams stashing him too as a potential replacement here for Cooper Kupp, or even just a way to get a little bit more versatility in their pass game. So a lot of landing spots for Wilson would be very intriguing in the second to third round range.
And I'll say the Steelers, like, intriguing. They don't
Yeah.
have a technical savvy route runner right
Yeah.
now. It's George Pickens and nobody else. Like, he could instantly go into the Deontay Johnson role, and I think he has that route running chops. He has better hands than Deontay Johnson. We know Deontay Johnson has had a lot of drop issues throughout his career. Like, he just reminds me of that type of player. Dare I say, a lesser version of Antonio Brown, but like the same body size too.
Yeah.
I'm not too worried about this body size being over 5'10. Like, that's fine. It's once it gets below 5'10 where you start to get a little bit nervous. 185 pounds is fine. It's because he doesn't, like, when I'm talking about Ladd McConkey being 185, that's why I'm shocked, because it looks like you could just snap his arms in half. It doesn't look the same with Roman Wilson. So I have him very high in my rankings, and I think instantly he could be a very good PPR, like in PPR leagues. He could be a really good volume wide receiver if he lands in a spot that need him, unlike the two that you just brought up. You brought up the Vikings. That would be an unfortunate landing spot full of, really good weapons. And then there was another team that was full of really good weapons. So maybe don't go there. I'm hoping he lands in a spot that he can get instant target, high target share.
Yeah, I do like the Cardinals and Chargers a lot for him. I'll throw out one more team is the Raiders. They need a little bit of help there in that spot to play off Devontae Adams, Jacoby Myers for their new quarterback situation. So a lot of good places for Roman Wilson. And again, I think he's going to be a volume-based guy, but I think usually slot guys are that here. And hopefully the production is there and he lands in the right spot. I just think a lot of Michigan players, you can't go wrong. They won the championship. There's going to be a lot of talent that is effective in reality and fantasy in the NFL. We'll get into two receivers not from Michigan there in our next segment, but another exciting SEC prospect as well. All right, it's a big time in two sports. That's the NBA and NHL. We're waiting. It's the NFL offseason. You might be able to look at futures there. But with FanDuel Sportsbook, with NBA and NHL looking to get to the finals and Stanley Cup, and baseball is headed toward the big month of May. FanDuel is your place to bet on every game. Right now, new customers get $150 in bonus bets guaranteed. That's $150, win or lose. You can bet on everything from slap shots to home runs to slam dunks, all on a website that is safe, secure, and easy to use. You can download the app and you're good to go with FanDuel. What are you waiting for? Visit fanduel.com/locked on and make your first bet an automatic win. And download the app as well, wherever you get your apps on your phone. Makes it easier with the taps to bet on all these events. So FanDuel, check it out. It's America's #1 sports book for a reason. FanDuel now taking bets on all the exciting action in the NBA, NHL, and MLB. All right, Michelle, it is time to continue looking at these wide receivers. It's been a lot of fun. I like breaking down these receivers. I've done them for a while now, looking at the class and the big board and the mock drafts, and finally time to put these guys with teams here. And we'll do that in a couple days. Now, Xavier Legette, and we'll get into him. The other Xavier, I want to call him here, Xavier Worthy, we talked about being that speed demon at the combine. Now, when you see Legette, what do you think a team will get in this player?
Yeah, so Legette has a rare skill set being both big and fast, right? I think we talk about Xavier Worthy's combine. We should really be talking about Legette's combine. He's 6'1", 221 pounds, and he clocked a 4.39. Clocking a 4.39 at that size is just insane. And then he also had a 40-inch vertical jump. So extremely, extremely explosive and athletic. And he's an excellent contested catch wide receiver, maybe the best in the class. Big catch radius, only had 2 drops all year long and 97 targets. He creates yards after contact. The issue with him is he had 1 year of production. I mean, when I say production, he did absolutely nothing the first 4 years in college, right? Now, there could be reasons for this. Unfortunately, both of his parents passed right before college. And then the pandemic hit going into his second year of college, and he got into a motorcycle accident in his third year. Like, there are reasons why he could have had a slow way to being good in college, but also we can't just rule out that he was really good this last year because he was older and bigger and stronger than the guys he was playing against. So that's the hard thing to juggle here. Was he just really good because of his size and strength and age? Or did it just take time with all the things that happened in his life for him to truly break out? I want to lean more towards the guy giving him the shot that I think he can be good in the NFL.
Yeah, he's done a lot of good things in the testing periods and the workouts to kind of back that up a little bit more. Like, that's what the scouts and evaluators looking for. Does he back it up? And that's usually what you want to see with all these workouts. And okay, we saw this on tape. Let's confirm or deny this by getting a close look at him. And I think he's done really well in this process. And I mentioned the Colts and going after Xavier Worthy. If they can't get Xavier Worthy, say he goes high as the Panthers, that could be a pick there in the top of the second round. That this would be not a bad guy to go after instead. So 2 Xaviers might be on the radar for the Colts because, again, he's got some big playability at his size at 6'1", and he's rising, so you can develop a little bit more. I think he might have a little bit more versatility overall than Worthy. I think Worthy can be a special outside guy, but maybe you get a little bit more of a do everything type receiver in Legette. And again, South Carolina, big thing was he had Spencer Rattler. There was someone to give him the ball that kind of connected with him well. So that type of player would also be helpful. So I look at this, a lot of landing spots for Jet, and he's one of those guys that could go mid-second, late second, early third. He's all over the board. It's just about the team preference here. And again, as we've mentioned with these receivers, we want them to land in a top 3 situation. Right now, I have him as number 10, really right behind Worthy and Coleman, who we talked about on Friday's show.
Yeah, I have him at 8, right behind Roman Wilson and Brian Thomas and Worthy and Franklin. I think a really nice landing spot for him would be the Ravens. I think he'd be a really nice pairing with Zay Flowers. Now, both would have speed. Let's talk about Legette real quick. He had 5 receptions of 50-plus yards last year. Like, this dude is a good deep threat, right? Big, strong, fast, like I mentioned. And Zay Flowers is a speedster too. But the difference is Legette is so good at contested catches, while Zay Flowers was the worst in many, many categories last year in contested catches. So that would be a nice compliment to him. I don't know if there'd be enough volume to go around to make Legette like a super strong fantasy option, because you have to also consider Mark Andrews, but he could be really good in the red zone there with the Ravens as well. So I would like that landing spot for him. And if he goes there, I don't know. It'd be if he landed with the Ravens, would you be interested in him fantasy for 2024?
Yeah, and we mentioned Keon Coleman could be a fit, and some of these technical receivers of the Ravens. The one thing is, keep in mind, the Ravens have not brought back Odell Beckham Jr. So Zay Flowers can make some big plays, but they may need that field stretching element as well. Because Rashad Bateman, I don't know what they think about him, but I don't know if they want another Rashad Bateman type that's kind of technical, but doesn't really stretch the field and doesn't really do much of anything of note for this offense. So Legette might be a little bit better fit there overall than one of those just pure technical receivers.
And then another wide receiver that's a little bit different. All right. It's Malachi Corley. He did not play in a Power 5 school. He played for Western Kentucky, so maybe a little bit lower competition, but he had 2 really nice years of production over the last 2 years. He led the FBS in yards after the catch this past year. Great contact balance, can drag defenders. 22 years old, 5'11", 270 pounds. When you watch him, it's very, very hard not to see Deebo Samuel. And I know when it's like a yards after the catch monster, everyone's going to compare him to Deebo Samuel, but like he has the same body size. Like they look like the same player out there. Now, was he dragging defenders because he was playing in a lower competition? Maybe, but I do think he could have that skill set of a Deebo in the NFL. Do I think that translates to fantasy production right away? Probably not, because his average depth of target is likely to be low. So he'll need a lot of targets, and he's going to need a team like Deebo has with a play caller that's smart enough to utilize him in that way. So it's a little bit more tricky for him, but he could land with the 49ers. That could be an option. They are looking for another wide receiver.
Yeah, that'll be especially juicy if Brandon Ayuk is traded and he moves up the charts a little bit. And they did bring back Jawan Jennings. I think you could also see Corley having that slot number 2 versatility as well. And my landing spot for him is actually the Broncos. I've talked about this a little bit. The Broncos actually are sneaky fit for a receiver because Sean Payton has seen what they've had. I mean, they moved on from Jerry Jeudy. Tim Patrick can't stay healthy. I don't know what you're going to get with Marvin Mims here. I mean, these guys didn't unlock him at all last year. So I don't know if he's like Jonathan Mingo and like the coaching staff isn't thrilled and they just want to find a different type of receiver to go in that. And with Cortland Sutton there's not much else, right? I mean, they're still trying to figure out tight end if any of these guys are going to pan out there between Greg Dulcich and Adam Troutman. So there's some openings there with the Broncos. It's a little sneaky of a landing spot, especially you figure them to get Bo Nix or some kind of a quarterback upgrade that they need over Jared Stidham. So something you look at the Broncos, I think he's a good fit to replace Jeudy, be active all over the field. So again, Corley, again, one of those guys that I may have undervalued a little bit at 16, but I will talk about one guy I like a little bit more than him, going a little bit earlier than him as well to another AFC West team.
Yeah, I have Corley at 12. I also like the Steelers could also be an option with Arthur Smith there, right? He likes those screen, like he could be a big part of the screen game. I think that would be an interesting fit for him there. It's going to be a very particular role he needs to play, and he's going to have to land with the right system. So landing spot for Malachi Corley will be huge. I'm excited to see where he goes. Like you said, we're going to bring up 2 more wide receivers. Now we're each going to pick our favorite guy that hasn't been talked about yet, right? So I actually don't know who you chose. I'm excited to learn about your favorite player we haven't talked about yet. We'll get into that to close out today's show right after we hear from one of our sponsors. This episode of Locked On Fantasy Football is brought to you by the Game Time app. Buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. Game Time is the fast and easy way to buy tickets for all the sports, music, comedy, and theater near you. anytime you're out and about and you want to go to a game, I'm telling you, just use the Game Time app. I've done it all the time. It's the easiest platform to use when you just want to know, like, everything's going to be easy. You're going to be able to see your seats. You're going to get the cheapest tickets guaranteed. It's going to be fantastic. I've used them so many times. You can rest assured that you'll always get the best price at Game Time, because if you find tickets in the same section in a row for less, Game Time will credit you with 110% of the difference. They also have your back, unlike some other the ticketing platforms. If event is canceled and not rescheduled, you'll automatically receive a full refund for such event. And they also allow you to return your tickets within 24 hours from time of purchase for a full credit to your Game Time account with no questions asked. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Again, that's LOCKEDONNFL, LOCKON NFL for $20 off. Terms do apply. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, Vinny, one wide receiver prospect that we have not yet named. Who is your favorite prospect that you're looking to see where he lands come round 2, round 3? Is that where your guy's going to go?
I think I have him sneaking into round 2, and he's going to go actually ahead of some guys that I have over him because of the style of player he is. And the funny thing about this Washington Huskies team, they have a good chance to have 3 wide receivers drafted. And this is how good this offense was last year. And Odunze, for good reason, has gotten all the attention. He's the centerpiece, the big playmaker. But don't forget about Jalen McMillan. I really liked this receiver for a while. He's a guy that I kind of associated with being their technical route runner that can really dominate the slot. And I did mention, remember the 2 teams, the Chargers and Cardinals, that could use a slot. I actually have him maybe as a so-called reach for the Chargers, because I think there's a little bit of Keenan Allen in his game. And that's going to remind the Chargers of this a little bit. And just had a good look at this receiver in the championship game, Jim Harbaugh. He was on the other side of the field, so they know what McMillan can do. There's always a possibility that the Seahawks, even with Jackson Smith and Najigba, with the Washington offense coordinator there, that they could look at these receivers as well. And it'll be interesting. It's a different offense, so it opens it up for these receivers. Maybe they're also looking phasing out Tyler Lockett. But I do like McMillan being this receiver that can do it with volume. We talked about Roman Wilson and Malachi Corley. I think he's right there. Like, it would not surprise me if any of these guys broke out and became a PPR asset right away in fantasy. Again, it just really depends on where they go and the volume that can be there. Again, we're looking for top 3 targets on their team to really circle someone we had in fantasy, and that definitely happened, right? With Dell and Nakua, they were both top 3 targets on their team, and that's why they broke out last year as rookies. So that's what we're looking for. And again, that's why I have McMillan on my radar.
It's interesting because there's Jalen Polk as well. You said they might have 3 wide receivers. None of them are in our top 15. Or Polk, either of us do not have him in our top 15, but he should be. Well, we'll see where he goes, right? He's also another speedster. A lot of those guys in this class. My favorite prospect we haven't named yet is Malik Washington from Virginia. Now, he's small, and I feel like that's the biggest issue here, right? He's only 5'8.5", and I don't love that. I wish he just had like 1 more inch on him, because I really hate when it's below the 5'9". Then it starts to get really sketchy. 191 pounds, so that's not bad weight for someone that short. But he plays much bigger than he is. Now, he is on the older side, also 24 years old. That's also not great. He's a 5-year player. The difference with him is the first 4 years he spent at Northwestern, and then he transferred to Virginia. I'm willing to ignore the first 4 years, and that might sound crazy, but Northwestern was the most trash team of all time. Just straight trash. So the last year he was there in 2022, Northwestern's leader had 1,644 pass yards and 6 pass touchdowns. The leader in 2021 had 978 passing yards and three touchdowns, 3 passing touchdowns. They won 4 games over those 2 seasons. Like, that offense and that team was straight trash. He goes to a somewhat okay team in Virginia. And guess what? He leads the FBS in receptions at 110. He was second in receiving yards per game, only behind Malik Neighbors in 2023. He led the FBS with missed tackles, forced missed tackles, even at this size. He had 35 forced missed tackles. He's super quick. His acceleration's amazing, but you saw this with his combine measurements as well. 42.5 vertical jump, 10 foot 6 inches broad jump, 4.47 40. That's plenty fine. Remember, like 4.4s are still really, really fast. He has great body control. Like, I really like everything about him, besides obviously the age and the height. But if he lands in a good spot where he can be a slot guy, like with the Falcons, I would love that. I would love him with Kirk Cousins. Instantly, I would love that landing spot. And I think he could be, I don't think he's going to be a superstar in fantasy anytime soon, but I think he's a sneaky sleeper. And I'm going to keep an eye on him.
All right, I'll try to get over the fact that you really ripped into my team. I mean, they were really bad those 2 years, and the first person that said we need to change the offense and get rid of the offensive coordinator was me those 2 years. So they're much better off now with their new coaching staff, all the good stuff, good vibes, good comeback year. But he had to go. I mean, if the offense stinks, it's going to drag you down, and you want to be showcased. And if years before that, they were still producing pretty good wide receivers, and it was tough to see that. I mean, they had Peter Skoronski, a first-round pick in the offensive line, and they still stunk. So I'm glad they moved on and have a better offense. I'm glad for Malik that he had a good shot to be drafted here by moving to a different program that could showcase him a little bit more and take advantage of his skill set. So I'm happy for that. I have him. Let's get nerdy here. In the 7-round mock draft I am as a fit, if Rondell Moore doesn't work out with the Falcons, going there to be a depth player for them and give them maybe a little bit of return ability if they need it as well. Moore, he's been terrible. I think they just wanted to move Desmond Ridder, and like, here was an offer. We'll take Rondell Moore. We'll take a shot at him. Ridder moved on. He became a backup. So I think they just want him out of the building. So they took Moore. So maybe there's a little bit of competition that develops. I know the Falcons receiving room is a little crowded. You can't assume with Darnell Mooney, because he was coming off injury, they did sign him to a good deal here, but there's no guarantees with anyone behind Drake London in this passing game. And look, they just have Kadero Hodge. He's not that interesting. So they need to have somebody there that they could maybe develop into a smaller slot. The 5'8" size is a little bit concerning, but the production is there. And that says something to him even being on the radar as a sleeper, because you mentioned not liking receivers below 5'9", but you can make a difference. We've seen it. Tank Dell is a bit of a mighty might that did that as well. So this can happen, and I do like it. I mean, again, there's so many receivers here that I would not be surprised coming through, but it might be some of these smaller names that don't get the attention. We've got some big names. I mean, Devontae Walker of North Carolina, Brendan Rice out of USC. These guys have faded really fast, and these other technical receivers and like this have really come through. So I like your choice a lot. I would be okay without bashing my team, but then we know what the Steelers' offense would look like the last 2 years.
Hey. I wasn't trying to hurt you. Now you're just trying to hurt me.
You know what? You have to go down to come back up. And I think that's going to happen to your Steelers. I'm going to embrace them to come back with Wilson. We came back. So you have to get to a point of stinking so much offensively that someone says we need to get a change. And look, hopefully Arthur Smith solves all your problems in Pittsburgh.
Probably not. I'm probably still going to be super sad.
If they draft one of these receivers we've been talking about, yeah, sure. Go get some receiving help. All these teams, there's so much wealth at this position. If you don't tap into this once, twice, I don't care. Just do it if you're a team that needs a wide receiver, because if you pass on this position, you're just nuts. I don't care what kind of offense you run this year. There is a flavor and a playmaker for everybody.
Yeah, I think we might see the first round wide receivers might not fly off the board, just for the fact that so many of these guys are kind of in the same tier, and you can get, depending on what you're looking for, there's a lot of options, right? So they might kind of fall into the second round for that, but I think we're going to see so many second round wide receivers this year. I'm going to run through my final order of the wide receivers that we talked about here, and then I'll let you do the same. So number 1, Marvin Harrison Jr., number 2, Rome Odunze, number 3, Malik Neighbors, number 4, Troy Franklin, number 5, Xavier Worthy, 6, Brian Thomas Jr., 7, Roman Wilson, 8, Xavier Legette, 9, Ladd McConkey, 10, Keon Coleman, 11, A.D. Mitchell. I did say I was low on him. 12, Malachi Corley, 13, Malik Washington, and then 14, Ricky Purcell. And then I'll just throw in a 15, Luke McCaffrey. I know, like maybe I'm just biased here with the last name, but I kind of like him. But yeah, those are my top 15. What are your top 15?
Yeah, from who we've talked about, and there's a few other guys that I had in between that we didn't get to, and I'll mention those just as people to put on your radar here as you're watching the draft for fantasy. But Marvin Harrison Jr., Malik Neighbors, Rome Odunze, the top 3. Then I have Brian Thomas. I've kind of jumped aboard the upside of A.D. Mitchell. I am at number 5. Then the interesting thing is I have Ladd McConkey behind him at 6, Troy Franklin. They're pretty close. Keon Coleman's everywhere. They said that was a tough call back-to-back. Legette at number 10. Then from the players we talked about, I go down to Purcell of what he can do out of Florida. And then we go to Corley and Wilson in that tier of receiver. And then going down, I'm looking at McMillan and Washington, who we broke down here. So to me, some other receivers that I would put on the radar, we talked about Jalen Polk a little bit. Javon Baker out of UCF has emerged a little bit late in the process. You also have Jermaine Burton, another receiver out of Alabama to keep an eye on. So those are a couple more. Johnny Wilson, is he a tight end? Is he a wide receiver? He's very big. He's 6'7", something to look at there. Jamari Trash out of Louisville. And then I mentioned Walker and Rice. Those are guys that I've soured on a little bit. So let's watch the draft and be aware that any of these guys, depending on their situation and talent, could be the next guy in your fantasy football lineup or backup.
Yeah, and if you want to hear about any of those guys or get more in-depth detail about any of these prospects that we did talk about, the Locked On Dynasty podcast has actually done episodes for like most of these prospects, like full 20, 30-minute episodes going through just one guy at a time.
Yeah.
So that's over the Locked On Dynasty podcast with Marcus Mosier and my wife, Kate Magdziuk. So go listen to them as well, right? Get as much information as you can. They may have differing opinions. Just because she's my wife does not mean we share opinions at all. We definitely have different opinions on these prospects. And then Marcus Mosier is extremely smart as well and can give you great information. That is it for today's show. Thank you to you all for making Locked On Fantasy Football your first listen every day. Every dayers, Vinnie and I will be back tomorrow talking rookie running back. So we're going to kind of do the same thing that we did with the wide receivers. Don't miss it. Bye, y'all.